Chink, translated from Turkic, means cliff. This term entered the geographical science thanks to the reports of the first travelers to Ustyurt and identifies the local steep slopes as a special geographical concept. Table plateaus exist in Africa and in the arid zone of the US far west. But the geological structure, origin and appearance of the Ustyurt Chinks is so different from all other plateaus in the world that scientists decided to give them a separate name. Therefore, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the Ustyurt Plateau is a tourist site unique on the global scale. Nowhere else around the globe do such chinks exist. The Ustyurt's area is over 200,000 square kilometers. It is one of the most sparsely populated regions on the planet. You can travel by car for several days and meet not a single human dwelling. No doubt, the perception of geographical scale in Europe and Asia have been traditionally quite different. In the Middle Ages, an average European would seldomly go away from his or her house for more than 50 kilometers, while the nomads of the Great Steppe measured their distance by weeks of travel. In 1730, a Swedish scientist, Philip Johann von Strahlenberg, for the first time put forward the idea of drawing the border between Europe and Asia along the Ural River. Dividing the continent of Eurasia into parts of the world, the geographers of that time were guided by not so much the landscape and geological characteristics, but historical and cultural factors. Modern research allowed scientists to specify that it is more logical to consider the eastern edge of the Caspian Depression the geographical division between Europe and Asia. That is the line from the western Ustyurt and Mangystau region through the northern Ustyurt and the Mongolia hills in Aktobe region up to the Ural Mountains. Whereas the border between the parts of the world passes across the Ustyurt Plateau longitudinally, then by latitude this is where desert, semi-desert and steppe zones meet. This is the area inhabited by steppe animal species typical for southern latitudes, like honey badgers, striped hyenas, caracals and urials or red sheep. Such an amazing landscape and biological diversity attracts travelers and researchers from all parts of the world. This time the Outdoor KZ film crew will take part in the international expedition of the Center for the Implementation of New Environmentally Friendly Technologies, jointly with the Forestry and Fauna Committee of the Ministry of Agriculture of Kazakhstan and the German Conservation Society with the assistance of the German government. The main task of the project is to engage local communities of Western Kazakhstan region in the preservation of the Ustyurt saiga population. Today we will travel from Aktobe to Mangystau regions and will cover approximately 1,000 kilometers across the desert. This time we have joined a project on involving the locals in protecting the saiga. Although the main objective of the expedition is to inspect the habitats of the Ustyurt saiga, whenever possible we will try to catch some other representatives of the Ustyurt fauna. For this purpose we will use video cameras and photo traps. We are starting from the village of Begembet. We will work together with the Nature Protection Police and Aktobe Region Territorial Inspection of the Forestry and Fauna Committee. The local residents will also play a special role in these efforts. It is impossible to ensure sustainable conservation of saiga only by administrative resources and activities. The locals living near the saiga need to get involved as well. A small official ceremony before the start of the actual expedition. The international experts, the staff of the nature protection agencies and the members of Bayan Shagan and Dalat Tabigati public associations are meeting with the residents of the settlements of Begembet and Baykadam. Nulibek Suyantayev, a representative of the Nature Protection Police, is explaining the nature protection legislation to the villagers, with a focus on combating poaching as well as the ongoing measures to stimulate public engagement in anti-poaching efforts. The staff of the Territorial Inspection and Okodzo Prom-Republican State Enterprise, responsible for protecting the saiga, are urging the locals to take joint actions to preserve this animal species sacred for all the Kazakh people. Stefan Michel, an expert of the German Conservation Society, sharing the international experience of cooperation between state and public nature protection organizations, and is presenting the rural nature activists with some gifts from their German colleagues: cameras, GPS navigators, binoculars and field glasses. Of course, people have been always living here in close proximity with the saiga. In hard times, the saiga fed the people. The local old-timers say that in the past, the saiga saved us by feeding us, and today is the time when we need to save them. As a species, saiga can quickly recover. This is what's most important. Adilbek Kozybakov, project coordinator, is announcing that public organizations of Mangystau and Aktobe regions, Dala Tabigati, Bayan Shagan and Koldau, Kazakhstan have established Tabigi Otar Regional Association with the aim of preserving the saiga. The organization will strive to ensure the long-term preservation and restoration of the Ustyurt saiga population. We, the villagers, have united and created Bayan Shagan Public Association because we see how drastically the number of saiga has reduced during the last 20 years. For us, this animal has a sacral value. We are not going to leave these places. This is where our children and grandchildren will continue to live. For them, this land without the saiga will lose its value. If we want them to live a happy life, we are simply obliged to preserve this sacred animal. Our descendants will not forgive us if it disappears. The formal activities are over and it's time for the expedition to move out. The SUVs easily roll over the ideally flat clay road, sometimes accelerating up to 80 km per hour. Green bushes of Ustyurt and Adraspan are still decorating the desert with bright-colored spots, but they will too soon fade, and the landscape will become sadly yellowish. Adraspan, or Hamel paganum, is in full bloom. Even inside the car, one can smell its tart odor. Many Turkic peoples allocate this plant with sacral properties. You have probably seen it yourself when they fumigate the rooms and rows in the food market with the dried up branches of Adraspan. We are confident that its spicy smell spreading across the steppe will clean our lungs too and will bring us good luck. Ustyurt, or anabasis, or wavy grass as it is also known, although a poisonous plant, the cattle does not eat it, is still very much valuable. It has been used in traditional medicine and earlier for soap making. They used to burn Ustyurt bushes and use the ash to make an excellent detergent. The area is very suitable for camel breeding. Almost all year round, they are able to feed on their own, and only during the most severe winter months, the youngsters need to be additionally fed with hay. Camels are the source of lean meat, wool and a delicious sour drink from camel milk, shubat. Household animals need water, thus their farms are located around artesian wells. On the horizon we see the darkening silhouette of a mountain chain. This is the Doneztau Chink, the northeastern edge of the Ustyurt Plateau. Some geographers consider it a part of the northern Chink, others consider it to be an independent ridge. Geologically, Doneztau is much older than the western Chink. The ancient sea receded from here several million years earlier. During that time, water and wind managed to erase most of the cliff. But even what has remained simply blows one's mind. Although as a group the expedition shares one main goal, each of its members has a separate task. The staff of Nature Protection Police, Captain Dilmukambat Duldilov and Senior Lieutenant Almat Sedigaliev, need to investigate the situation with poaching. The duties of Megan Sesenov, Chief Specialist of Aktobe Territorial Forestry and Fauna Inspection, include not only combating poaching but also collecting all the available data about the saiga population and other protected species. NGO activists Adilbek Kozybakov and Nurlikan Ismailov want to build up their cooperation with the local communities and install photo traps. We have been doing conservation for a long time, and during this time we understood that it is high time to engage not only nature protection official agencies and scientists, but also local communities. Stefan Mikel and Aybat Muzbai, experts of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, plan to perform the visual assessment of the saiga population. Our film crew will do its best to capture it all on camera. Approaching the chink, the yellow desert suddenly turns into the green steppe. Stefan Mikel is struck with the scale and vastness of the open space. It somewhat resembles the Serengeti Plains. In Europe there are almost no such places left. He thinks that with due effort in several decades, these steppes can be inhabited with Asiatic wild asses, saiga, Przewalski's horses and other animals peacefully grazing around.
Saiga это можно считать мировым наследием. Это
The saiga can be considered the world heritage. This species of antelopes has remained only in Kazakhstan and partially in Mongolia and Russia. Germany, although an economically powerful country, doesn't enjoy such a biodiversity anymore due to industrial development and dense population. Therefore, our country as well as the international community are investing into preservation of rare species worldwide. Not only the saiga, although it is a unique antelope which we have to preserve by all means. We see it as a global task. From edge to edge, the steppe is covered with brown spots. It's Tata pie plant or rhubarb. Under its large leaves, the saiga newborns are taking cover from predators and the scorching sun. Humans have been making use of the plant also. Its fleshy stalks can be turned into delicious jam and compote. This plant here, although well known, only a few people have seen in real life. We often say, have you eaten too much henbane, meaning have you gone crazy when we see that a person is behaving bizarre. Princess Circe used henbane to turn Odysseus's companions into pigs. Nevertheless, using henbane wisely, it can serve a great medicine. The thistle lady butterfly cannot lose time. Until the spring steppe is covered with cornflowers and field asters, it needs to properly eat and manage to leave posterity. When the steppe dries up, the new generation of young butterflies will migrate to a favorable climatic zone to have baby butterflies there and return here only next spring. The life of a butterfly is too short and it needs to hurry to do everything planned by the nature for it from beginning to end. The dried Russian fly seems a vegetarian only at first sight. In fact, it is nourishing an artful idea of leaving its larvae inside the bodies of other insects. It is useful for humans as it reduces the number of harmful insects, for example locusts. The burials of the past eras prove that people have been living here and engaged in agriculture long before they learned to drill artesian wells. The ancient masters dug wells in depressions covered with green vegetation where groundwaters lie close to the ground surface. Household animals can get water from wells dug by humans. Wild animals have to look for the water themselves and thus their habitats are limited by the access to watering places. Even the saiga, an animal well adapted to desert conditions, need water from time to time, especially the feeding females. The depressions where meltwater accumulates are called thalvags. The locals call the thalvag along the Donestau chink the Shagan River, and this is exactly where the expedition is heading. Shagan can be called a river only conditionally, although in the spring during snow melting it is quite deep. During that time it extends for about 60 kilometers along the northern Donestau chink. In the summer it dries up and breaks into several cut-off channels, which ducks use for nesting, and boars are living there too. The channels grow over with cane and serve as a watering place for saiga. Two duck families are peacefully sharing one puddle. Each of them has its own survival strategy. Fish duck nestlings are trying to dive and baby pintails stay still pretending being leaves. Sand grousers are whistling through the evening steppe sky. Two species live here, white and black-bellied ones. Both of them are included in the national red list. During their second year of life, young cranes still do not reproduce and stay in large teenage companies, while adult birds lead a secluded married couple life. Steppe eagles and long-legged buzzards are the most widespread avian species of prey in the northern Ustyurt chink. They are literally all over the place. The steppe eagle suited a nest on top of a surveying benchmark installation. The birds usually build their nests as high as possible, but if there are no trees nearby, then a concrete column will do. In the desert, toys are a deficit, so an old shoe sole will be an excellent substitute. We need to be quick photographing the baby bird. If it stays without its mother's protection for too long, it will get burned by the sun. Buzzards have built their nest on the fence of a deserted camp. Near the predator's nest, there are dozens of field sparrow nests. In fact, they like lodging close to buzzards. This way they get the food remains and are protected from small fisipedes. Apparently, the buzzards care less about the sparrows. Each of the nests has a couple of carcasses of yellow gophers inside. It appears that gophers and gerbils are tastier than sparrows. Grey gerbils live in colonies. This nice little animal is not as harmless as it seems, as it can serve as a plague vector. Zoologists working in the anti-plague service carefully monitor gerbil populations. Just in case, it's better not to touch anything with your hands here. It's hard to build up relationships in a big group, but if you regularly demonstrate respect to senior and larger animals, you will be okay. Together it's easier to protect yourselves against eagles and foxes. While everybody is feeding, one sentry vigilantly surveys the colony limits. By the way, it seems it's time to run for shelter. Someone with a cunning red snout is approaching. Fox is one of the most widespread fauna species in Kazakhstan. You can encounter the red beauty in the mountains, 3,500 meters above sea level, and in the waterless desert. The gerbils have hidden the holes, but the fox is not going to give up just like that. Midday gerbils are several times smaller than grey gerbils and look more like hamsters. They live not in large colonies but in families comprising several individuals. Sometimes midday gerbils are very credent and are practically not afraid of humans. In case of not succeeding with catching a vole, the fox can be content with a gecko. However, the tiny gecko is not enough to make a good lunch. A gama, on the contrary, will have some good calories. The starter on one of the vehicles broke down. If it had manual transmission, we could tow it, but with the automatic one, it would be a rather bad tactic. We are forced to improvise repairing the SUV with the makeshifts. In the afternoon, the temperature here rises to 40 degrees. It's hot by any standards. Let's try building an improvised yurt. Well, thanks God, everything worked out well. It would be really hard pulling the truck from here. The The expedition is ascending the plateau. Looking at Donestau from a jet, the plateau will look like an archipelago of trapezoid islands with flat tops and abrupt edges towering over the ocean of the plain. The expedition has reached the top of the plateau and fixed the camp close to the cliff edge. Duisenberg Aga wants to show us something interesting. Near our camp, there is a site considered sacral. Imagine you are traveling across the steppe and suddenly, in the middle of the ideally flat plain, there towers this natural stone monument. The locals call it a meteorite. It's hard to say what it really is, but we will show its pictures to experts upon returning from the expedition. Undoubtedly, this is a residual hill or Inselberg. Once upon a time, there were mountains here, but they were all destroyed by wind, rain and time. This rock most likely is of volcanic origin. The most part of the modern Ustyurt plateau is comprised of sedimentary rocks, limestones, plasters and shell rocks that had accumulated on the bottom of the ancient ocean. Soft rock is an excellent material for skillful architects like wind and water. Wind and water erosion have transformed the rock into a true masterpiece. However, what we see is a not yet finished piece of art. It's still the intermediate product of abrasive forces, because the final purpose of their entropy is eliminating the ancient mountains completely, turning them into an ideally flat plain. Geological solids possess different degrees of durability. Some can resist erosion for millions of years more than others, and tower over the plain as the magnificent monuments of the time when the Earth was a fire-spitting cauldron of boiling lava. In order to see wild animals, one needs to get up early. Zoologists and tour operators have a phrase, regime time. This is the period when animals are most active, from 5 to 7 a.m. and in the evening before sunset. This is when it's possible to make more or less good pictures. During the day, the hot air rising from the ground creates such a haze that it's almost impossible to see anything. We got lucky at last. Early in the morning, the researchers spotted a group of saiga from the Chink top. Our operators managed to approach the saiga quite close, but the sun is shining directly into the lens. It's only 7 in the morning, but the streams of hot air are already turning the horizon into a floating mirage. We'll have to relocate. Like people, saiga have different characters. Some are timid, some are trustful, young or grown wise with experience. Sometimes animals focus on searching for food so much that forget to monitor their surroundings. Our operators got lucky, and after the long search, they at last found a careless model for the photo shoot.
На первый взгляд кажется, что сайгак массовый вид, и увидеть его ничего сложного.
At first it seems that there are many saiga, that it's an abundant species. Yet in reality it's not so simple to encounter them. I remember when a child I would travel by train and see saiga herds grazing about 100 meters away from the roadway. Nowadays, and in real-life conditions, it's not so easy. First of all, because the Ustyurt group is dispersed across an enormous area, comparable to the size of a couple of European countries taken together. Second of all, it is the smallest group, only 3,500 animals, which inhabit this area by small herds, so it's not that easy finding them. Also, it's a very cautious animal. It can notice a vehicle from a distance of 2 kilometers and runs away at enormous speed that even the monitoring camera doesn't switch on. In the plain, it's almost impossible approaching them. What we do is we try finding some small hillocks, topographic inequalities, in order to be able to creep up to them as close as possible. Out of the 3 saiga groups living in Kazakhstan, the Ustyurt population suffered the most. In the late 80s, it amounted to about 250,000 individuals, but in the course of the next several decades, it decreased drastically. Scientists even doubted that it can recover, yet recently they have seen some progress.
Когда мы собирались в эту экспедицию, мы консультировались со специалистами и
Getting ready for the expedition, we consulted with experts.
наших шансов.
And there are more than conservative forecasts concerning our chances to see and especially film the saiga of the smallest Ustyurt group did not encourage a lot of optimism.
Тем более,
Imagine our feelings when we were able to see a herd with over 200 animals. We were simply astonished. Of course, it's a good sign. We have something to be proud of, for sure.
конечно, это очень хороший знак. И ребятам на самом деле есть чем гордиться.
Mobile task forces of the Aktobe and state enterprise monitor the Ustyurt chinks by 15 days shifts. Each group has all the surveying equipment it needs, like satellite communication and even an all-wheel drive Kamaz box truck.
Производим охрану на территории Актубинской и Мангистауской области на границе.
We survey the border of Aktobe and Mangystau Regions and the Ustyurt Plateau. It's the end of the lambing season now. The saiga have already calved and everything is safe. In many respects, the situation is good now thanks to the efforts of public associations, Nature Protection Police and the Aktobe and Republic State Enterprise, where we ourselves work. The locals help us a lot too. Raising public awareness about the nature is one of the priorities of the Rukani Jangiru National Program. Environmental education and upbringing has to start from early childhood, at school and within the family. State media play a significant role in this process as well. Only complete environmental literacy will help us avoiding the mistakes of the past.
Казахстанское правительство за последние примерно 20 лет.
During the last 20 years, the government of Kazakhstan has been investing big money and a lot of effort into preserving the saiga. And our organization, NABU, or the German Union for Nature Conservation, has been assisting Aktobe with optical equipment, like field glasses, cameras and binoculars. We see that it's impossible for state organizations to cover everything and everywhere. Preservation of the saiga and other rare animals, in many respects, depends on the people who live near them. Ustyurt remains one of the most sparsely populated areas on the planet. This fact was used by the military during the Soviet period. Closed shooting sites were utilized for missile firing exercises. In the 70s, 3 underground nuclear explosions created huge underground cavities in Ustyurt for storing water in case of war. At present, the areas of deserted shooting sites are of bad repute among the locals, where ufologists and science fiction fans come here willingly. The first Soviet horror movie, The Dogs, was filmed close to one of the former sites. We also decided to risk spending the night near the abandoned shooting range. In the middle of the night, a strange sound started coming from the bunker, as though zombies were trying to gnaw their way out. Scared, we switched on our flashlights. It turned out that there were no monsters but a tiny midday gerbil that was attracted by the smell of cookies in our stocks. This is the skull of a male saiga that apparently was killed by poachers several years ago. You can see the traces when they cut off its horns. The current total number of the saiga is so low due to commercial poaching. Yet the population is slowly increasing. We are encouraged by the fact that the number of young and healthy males is rising in many groups. It gives us hope that in the future this population will be steadily recovering. Archaeological finds and ancient graves prove that people have been living on the Ustyurt plateau since most ancient time. They shared this land with wild animals, treating everything created by the nature with great respect. Our ancestors have left the rich fauna, and we have to be grateful to them for it. Our main task is to preserve the legacy of our forefathers and carefully keep it for future generations. This lodge near the Donestau spring is a true tourist shelter. Anyone can come here and stay absolutely free of charge. Cook food, use tableware and beds. It was built by the descendants of the people who used to live here hundreds of years ago. To leave a mark in history for people to remember their kin and their ancestors, somebody decided to do a good thing, and we will make use of it now. We will spend a couple of hours here, have a dip in the spring, and we'll be on our way. Everything that a person needs to be happy. It's not Antalya, guys, it's Ustyurt. As the expedition is progressing southward, the landscape around is gradually changing. On the western Ustyurt chink, there are no more green feather grass steppes. The top of the plateau is covered with yellow saltwood deserts. The fauna is changing also. No more saiga here, but plenty of goitered gazelles and trans-Caspian urials. According to the book Mammals of Kazakhstan in 1970, the number of goitered gazelles on the territory of Mangystau Peninsula was estimated at 100,000 animals, but in recent years it fell significantly. This is yet another concern for ecologists. Trans-Caspian urial or the Ustyurt mouflon needs special protection too. In the course of the last 30 years, their number decreased 5 times. Adilbek Kozybakov and Nurlikan Ismailov have been installing photo traps in the most remote corners of Ustyurt for over a year. Checking the photo traps is rather fascinating. The passion that a researcher experiences is similar to that of a hunter. What did the camera catch today? This time it caught a Trans-Caspian urial, a wolf and a steppe cat. And this photo trophy is more rare and valuable, a Karakal lynx. Science knows very little about the number of those most rare cats in Kazakhstan. How many of them are left? We hope future research will answer this question. The defenders of the nature are often the ones ringing the alarm, pointing to the problems, drawing public attention to various environmental issues and challenges, so that in some distant future they could see that the problems have been addressed and their efforts were not in vain, that the threats to a given species have become not as significant, that animal populations are stabilizing and even growing. Our expedition is not coming to an end, but is recessing for a short bit. We will take a little rest, fix our gear, bring the collected data into order, and will continue our journey across the western Ustyurt chink very soon. Don't miss our next episodes to learn more about this fascinating area.